What happens when a natural disaster provides the perfect cover for a calculated crime? This is the story of a tornado, a disappearance, and a secret hidden in plain sight that would unravel a carefully constructed web of lies. Imagine reporting your husband missing in the chaos of a storm, pleading for help, while knowing the entire time exactly where he was. This is the disturbing case that left investigators questioning everything they saw and heard. On the evening of May 4, 2022, at 7:18 p.m., emergency services in Norman, Oklahoma, received a call from 41-year-old Chenise Dollar. She reported that her 45-year-old husband, Marlon Dollar, had gone missing after stepping outside to inspect their property following a tornado. The dispatcher asked for confirmation, and Chenise repeated that Marlon had left through the back door of their rented home on East Ridge View Drive to check the backyard fences and had not come back. Police arrived at 7:32 p.m. and found Chenise in the driveway. She was visibly shaking, speaking rapidly, and gesturing toward the storm-damaged area behind the house. She stated that Marlon had exited around 6:45 p.m., taking no phone, tools, or flashlight, claiming he only meant to be outside for a moment. Chenise reported hearing debris hit the house and assumed he had taken shelter under an overhang or near a drainage ditch. When he failed to return after 10 minutes, she said she called out for him. She described the area as hazardous and insisted he must have been knocked off his feet or injured somewhere out of view. Officers performed a preliminary search of the immediate vicinity, including damaged fence lines, shallow ditches, and scattered debris. They found detached fence panels, uprooted tree branches, and light metal fragments across neighboring lots. The patrol supervisor called for a formal search grid, and by 8:20 p.m., additional deputies, fire rescue teams, and volunteers began combing the area, expanding toward an open field and a group of storage sheds displaced by the tornado. Detective Roderick Ames, 39, was assigned as the lead investigator and arrived at the scene at 9:05 p.m. He documented Chenise's statement, noting that she used nearly identical wording each time she described the event. Ames inquired about Marlon's physical health, recent conduct, and whether they had argued that evening. She answered no to each question, portraying Marlon as calm and focused on post-storm cleanup. Before we continue, let us know in the comments what you think is the biggest red flag in this story so far. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into real-life mysteries. Ames logged the details, marking her repeated emphasis on the wind, pulling him away, as notable, given the lack of specific evidence to support that theory. The search continued overnight and into the next day. Teams checked culverts, drainage channels, overturned sheds, and debris from nearby structures. They found no footprints leading away from the property, no torn clothing, or any personal items. A deputy examined the storm-damaged tree line and discovered only fallen branches and insulation fragments. Official notes described the search as yielding no signs of the subject's movement. Chenise provided a second statement on May 5 at 10:30 a.m. She again asserted that Marlon had left the house alone and vanished behind the yard, adding that the storm had been too loud for her to hear anything afterward. Ames asked about Marlon's usual habits during severe weather. She said he often inspected utility lines and fences after storms but typically carried tools. Ames recorded her acknowledgement that this time was different, though she could not explain why. By May 6, with no findings from ground searches or aerial surveys, the case was reclassified from a missing person response to a suspicious disappearance. Ames briefed the team, highlighting the absence of physical evidence and the repetitive nature of Chenise's accounts. He noted that she offered no further details when asked specific questions about the direction Marlon walked, his clothing, or their last verbal exchange. During a walkthrough of the house, officers observed no signs of forced entry or disorder. The interior appeared tidy. However, Ames recorded a point of interest. The garage door was locked, and Chenise stated she preferred officers not enter due to hazardous wiring caused by the storm. She claimed the breaker had been tripping intermittently and she had been advised to avoid the garage until repairs were made. Ames asked if Marlon had entered the garage that day. She said he had not. Ames logged this as a restricted access area pending an electrical assessment. He tried to look into the garage from outside windows but found them fully covered by blinds. Without clear evidence of immediate danger, the team continued to focus on outdoor searches and neighbor interviews. But what happens when a simple utility inspection shatters a perfectly crafted story? The truth was about to be uncovered in the most chilling way possible. On May 11, 2022, 1 week after the disappearance was reported, an electrician named Thomas Leary, 52, arrived at the Dollar residence to inspect the unstable wiring in the garage. The service order had been issued after Chenise reported repeated breaker failures. Leary later told investigators that Chenise escorted him through the side door into the garage and stayed close behind him as he worked, offering unsolicited explanations about storm damage and repeating that she never used the space. As Leary continued his inspection, he moved a large horizontal freezer positioned against the back wall. He shifted it slightly to reach an outlet and immediately noticed condensation on the lid and a faint chemical smell that didn't match standard refrigerant. When he unplugged the unit, he lifted the lid to check for frost buildup. Inside, he saw a body wrapped tightly in a construction tarp with several boxes of strawberry and vanilla ice cream arranged on top. He closed the lid, stepped back, and exited the garage, calling 911 at 2:46 p.m. Responding officers arrived within minutes and secured the area. They opened the freezer, documented the contents, and identified the body as Marlon Dollar based on tattoos and clothing remnants. Chenise was brought outside. According to body camera transcripts, she appeared pale, was shaking, and repeatedly stated she did not know how Marlon's body had ended up in the freezer. She told officers an unknown person must have put him there after the storm and insisted she had barely used the garage in months due to unsafe wiring. Detective Roderick Ames arrived at 3:18 p.m. and conducted an on-site interview with Chenise. He noted that she repeated nearly identical phrases when explaining the discovery. Ames asked why she had not mentioned the freezer in earlier interviews. She responded that the unit had been there a long time and she didn't think it was important. This statement was immediately contradicted when a receipt recovered from her purse showed the purchase of that very freezer on April 30th, just 3 days before the tornado. What would you have done if you were the detective at this moment? Share your thoughts below. Forensic technicians conducted an initial assessment of the garage. Under a rubber mat placed a few feet from the freezer, they found drag marks consistent with moving a heavy object. Luminol testing revealed diluted blood smears forming a faint trail between the entry door and the freezer. Additional smears were found under the freezer's wheels. A preliminary conclusion indicated the body had been dragged across the garage floor rather than placed directly into the freezer at the time of death. Ames directed officers to canvass the neighborhood. Interviews produced multiple statements describing unusual activity at the Dollar property. One neighbor, Elias Perry, 58, reported hearing movement inside the garage late at night on several occasions, including the night after the tornado. Another neighbor, Kendra Ruiz, 33, stated she saw the garage light on for 4 hours during heavy rain 2 nights after Marlon was reported missing. Neither neighbor reported seeing Marlon leave the property after the tornado. Evidence collection continued as Chenise remained in the living room under observation. Officers noted she repeatedly asked whether someone could have put him there to hurt her but offered no explanation for the recent freezer purchase. Ames recorded her demeanor as calm, repetitive, and non-reactive to key evidence, noting the stark contrast between her statements and the forensic findings. With the body recovered, the missing person investigation formally became a homicide inquiry. Ames expanded the scope to include financial and digital records. He requested Marlon's bank statements, insurance documents, and employment files, noting that the circumstances, the freezer purchase, the concealed body, and the nighttime garage activity pointed toward deliberate staging. Chenise was transported to the station for a formal interview but maintained her original story. She claimed complete ignorance of the body's presence and denied entering the garage for any reason other than to guide the electrician. Her answers remained nearly identical to her initial statements, even when officers presented physical evidence that contradicted her. As the financial motive came to light, the picture of premeditation became impossible to ignore. What started as a stormy disappearance was revealing itself as a cold, calculated plan. On May 12, Detective Ames issued subpoenas for the Dollars' financial records. The documents revealed that on April 27, 1 week before the tornado, Marlon Dollar had signed a new life insurance policy for $450,000, with Chenise listed as the sole beneficiary. The insurance agent, Daniel Kersey, 46, stated that Chenise had contacted him twice, requesting the application be expedited due to storm season and general uncertainty. He confirmed she was present during the final signing and asked how soon the coverage would be active. Ames logged these as indicators of a financial motive. Next, Ames contacted Marlon's employer, North Plains Roofing. Interviews with coworkers revealed that Marlon had recently spoken about ongoing conflict at home. One colleague, Luis Traynor, 29, said Marlon had mentioned escalating arguments about money and his intention to file for divorce. According to Traynor, Marlon planned to move out after completing storm repairs, intending to get through the week before making the separation official. Another coworker recalled Marlon expressing concern that Chenise would make things difficult if he tried to leave. Ames then reviewed call logs from neighbors on East Ridge View Drive for the night of May 4. 2 residents reported hearing a hard impact or loud thud from the Dollar garage between 8:10 and 8:20 p.m. One witness, Carlton Joyce, 61, said he heard the noise followed by the sound of something being dragged across the floor. Another neighbor, Tanya Bell, 42, gave a similar account, noting that while storm sirens were active, the garage noises were distinct. While interviewing the medical examiner that afternoon, Ames learned the preliminary findings from the autopsy. The examiner reported bruising and skull fractures consistent with blunt force trauma inflicted before death. The injury pattern suggested a single, forceful strike from close range. Blood samples taken from a metal pipe found leaning against the garage wall showed trace DNA matching Marlon's profile. This ruled out any possibility of accidental death by storm debris. With contradictions mounting, Ames conducted a second formal interview with Chenise on May 13. She maintained that she had no involvement in Marlon's death and repeated that an unknown individual must have put him in the freezer. When asked about her nighttime presence in the garage, she paused before stating she might have gone in briefly to check for leaks. Ames presented statements from neighbors describing late-night movements and extended periods with the garage light on. He also showed her the freezer's power usage logs, which indicated frequent lid openings throughout the week following the disappearance report. Ames pressed further, asking directly why she would be heard talking in the garage, referencing comments from Chenise's teenage daughter, who had overheard her. Chenise became visibly tense and avoided eye contact. After several seconds, she replied, "I needed him to understand," but gave no further explanation. Ames recorded the phrase verbatim. When presented with the medical examiner's findings of blunt force trauma, Chenise denied striking Marlon. She insisted he must have been injured by flying debris, despite the injury occurring before the tornado's peak and the drag marks showing post-mortem movement. As the interview progressed, she repeated fragmented explanations that contradicted her earlier statements. When asked to clarify why she purchased the freezer shortly before the storm, she ended the interview and requested a lawyer. The evidence was overwhelming, but the final confession would reveal the terrifying truth behind the calm facade. What really happened in that garage as the tornado sirens wailed? On May 14, Ames executed a new search warrant at the Dollar residence. Crime scene technicians began a full forensic sweep at 8:12 a.m. Under the freezer's wheels, they found compressed dust lines and scuff marks, indicating the unit had been moved twice. A path of disrupted dust extended from the side entry door to the freezer's final position. Ames located a torn work glove wedged under a paint can. Preliminary tests detected dried blood that later matched Marlon's profile. Near the water heater, investigators found a discarded receipt for industrial strength cleaner dated May 5, the morning after Chenise reported Marlon missing. Residue was found in a bucket in the garage, suggesting attempts to remove blood. In the kitchen, a drawer held a folded tarp matching the material wrapped around Marlon's body. Store records showed Chenise had purchased multiple tarps of that brand 2 months earlier. Analysis of Chenise's laptop internet history revealed recent searches for death benefits timeline, missing person after tornado, insurance claim processing delay, and how long ICE preserves evidence. Several searches occurred in the early morning hours during the week Marlon was reported missing. Ames noted the pattern indicated planning, not panic. Bank statements showed Chenise was behind on mortgage payments by 2 months and had maxed out credit cards. Her part-time clerical job income was insufficient to cover expenses. The life insurance provider confirmed Chenise had called twice during the week after the tornado to ask if she could start the claim process if Marlon was not found. Ames interviewed Chenise's 16-year-old daughter, Ariel, who lived at the residence part-time. Ariel stated she had heard her mother in the garage late at night on multiple occasions after the disappearance, talking to someone and sometimes raising her voice. She assumed her mother was arguing with Marlon but was too afraid to investigate. Ariel also reported that Chenise and Marlon had argued more frequently in the weeks before the storm, primarily about money and home repair costs. According to her, Marlon told her on April 30th that he planned to leave after the storm passed. Ariel said her mother grew increasingly upset after learning of his intention. On May 15th, after an arrest warrant was issued, Chenise Dollar was formally interrogated. After initially repeating her story, she eventually admitted that she and Marlon had argued on the afternoon of May 4th. She stated that Marlon informed her he intended to file for divorce and she would lose the house. She claimed the argument moved into the garage where Marlon went to get tools. Chenise described grabbing a pipe without thinking and swinging it once, striking him in the head. She said the tornado sirens were active and she believed the noise covered the sound. She panicked when he collapsed and made no attempt to call for help. Instead, she dragged his body to the recently purchased freezer, placing boxes of ice cream over the tarp-wrapped body so that the kids wouldn't see anything. She fabricated the disappearance story, believing investigators would conclude he was swept away by the storm. The case proceeded to trial, and on September 12, 2022, Chenise Dollar was found guilty of first-degree murder, fraudulent concealment of a body, and insurance fraud. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole, her calculated use of a natural disaster to mask a terrible crime ultimately failing to withstand the weight of evidence and the persistence of the truth.